Welcome to the deep dive. We've sifted through a whole stack of your sources, articles, insights, research, and today we're really getting into the engine room of the current tech landscape.
That's a good way to put it. We're looking at the infrastructure, the hidden stuff that's actually fueling this whole AI revolution that everyone's talking about.
Exactly. And our goal, as always, is to cut through some of that noise, pull out the key insights from the material you gave us, and help you understand what's really happening behind those headlines.
Making sense of the bigger picture.
Because the sources, well, they paint this fascinating picture of where the real focus is right now. The energy, the money, it's chips, it's massive data centers.
Right, the companies delivering AI to businesses, and even a look at a big name like Tesla and the pressures they're facing.
Yeah, it's a snapshot purely from your sources of what big tech is pouring its resources into right now.
So where do we start? The foundation.
Let's do it. Unpacking that first big theme. Who's making the chips? Who's building the places where the AI actually happens? The sources are, well, very clear on NVIDIA's role.
Yeah, what's striking is just how dominant NVIDIA is presented in these sources.
Yes.
It's not just leading. Well, there are basically no challengers mentioned who can really take significant market share from them right now.
So dominant that others want to work with them.
Exactly. Even potential competitors, newcomers like Qualcomm, are mentioned as wanting to partner up. The challenge for NVIDIA, according to the sources, isn't really about fending off rivals for their core tech.
It's more about
keeping the incredible level of spending going.
Yeah.
Maintaining the momentum for building out all this AI infrastructure. Nobody seems to think they could be knocked off their perch anytime soon.
Okay, so NVIDIA's got the compute. Who's actually building the physical stuff, the servers, the data centers? Dell and CoreWeave pop up a lot in the sources.
Right, and they're described as having this really deep technical partnership. It sounds like it's built on a lot of trust. Well, Dell builds the servers, often using tech like NVIDIA's GPUs inside, and CoreWeave builds the specialized data center infrastructure. CoreWeave apparently needs partners they can absolutely trust to move incredibly fast.
Because their customers need to be first.
Exactly. Especially when you're building supercomputers at scale. Dell was apparently instrumental in things like getting the new GB200 systems rolled out quickly.
Interesting. Sometimes you hear CoreWeave's model described pretty simply, like they just buy GPUs and rent them out. But the sources suggest it's more complex.
Yeah, that comes up this idea of commoditization. But CoreWeave pushes back, arguing their platform is actually decommoditized. Meaning winning big clients, like the sources mentioned OpenAI expanding their deal with them, isn't just about having the hardware. It's the software, how the infrastructure is run, the data operations.
The whole package.
And that engineering partnership, that collaboration, it's presented as much more than just a capital expenditure play.
Okay, speaking of AI companies using this, Cohere comes up, focused on the enterprise market. Why would a company like Cohere partner so closely with someone like Dell, or need this kind of infrastructure setup?
The key thing the sources really hammer this home is security and trust, especially for enterprise customers.
Right. Big companies, sensitive data.
Exactly. They need the powerful hardware, the GPUs, yes, but they really need to know their data is secure. And Cohere's edge, or their moat, as the sources put it, is their ability to deploy their platform.
Like their North Agent platform.
Right. To deploy that on-premise on the customer's own infrastructure or on any cloud. That control over data location is huge for businesses.
So on-prem means it's running literally inside the company's own building or data center, not out in the cloud somewhere.
Precisely. And this security angle is what the sources say pushes customers, particularly in regulated fields, think financial services, government, telco, energy, toward Cohere, sometimes over OpenAI or Anthropic.
Because they just can't use the tech otherwise.
In many cases, yeah. For them, keeping data locked down isn't a nice-to-have, it's a requirement. The sources even note that moving back to on-prem was considered unthinkable not long ago.
But Cohere figured it out.
They got good at it. And for these regulated industries, it's described as the only option to safely plug AI agents into their critical systems and actually see some ROI.
And how's that enterprise focus working out for Cohere's growth? What did the sources say?
Pretty well, it seems. Revenue reportedly more than doubled this past year. Based on reports mentioned last year, putting them around $100 million annualized, they'd be significantly past that now.
Profitable?
Not yet. The sources point to the huge costs, mainly compute and hiring top talent, but they're described as being very, very close to profitability. Enterprise growth is clearly fueling things, and they plan to keep fundraising as they head towards a potential IPO.
Okay, you mentioned huge costs, massive compute needs. That brings us to the scale of all this. The sources talk about some truly enormous projects like this Stargate initiative, OpenAI, and SoftBank involved.
Yeah, the scale is, well, it's almost mind-boggling. One source makes a comparison to building the entire U.S. interstate highway system.
Wow.
Arguably the biggest infrastructure project ever, which completely reshaped the economy.
Yeah.
This AI build, Stargate potentially being a $500 billion piece of it,
Yeah.
is framed as creating that same kind of fundamental infrastructure, a superhighway system for intelligence.
Just massive buildings packed with GPUs.
Buildings full of NVIDIA GPUs.
What?
Yeah, to meet what's consistently called insatiable demand. Now, there's skepticism mentioned about raising that kind of money, that $500 billion.
Sure, that's a huge number.
But you have figures like Masayoshi Son at SoftBank, who reportedly have this deep conviction that AGI, artificial general intelligence, is coming and will change everything. That kind of belief keeps pushing these massive ambitions forward.
Is this building boom happening everywhere at the same pace, though? I noticed the sources mention some conflicting headlines, data center cancellations here, huge deals in the Gulf there.
That's a really important nuance. While some hyperscalers, the big cloud providers, might be pausing or shifting specific projects in certain regions,
Pulling back a bit.
maybe adjusting parts of their portfolio, but the overall trend the sources point to is still this demand stepping up by an order of magnitude. Short-term pauses don't seem to be changing the long-term massive expansion strategy.
And what about where this is being built? Any strategic considerations or concerns mentioned?
Definitely. Looking out 5 years, the demand seems clear, but customers are getting much more strategic about where they deploy, especially in different sovereign areas.
And there are concerns.
Yeah. The sources specifically mention worries on Capitol Hill, apparently bipartisan worries, about U.S. tech, especially those high-end NVIDIA GPUs.
Going to places like the Middle East.
Right. The concern is that could potentially create a backdoor for adversaries, specifically China, to gain access to cutting-edge U.S. AI technology.
And what's actually running on all this hardware? Is it mostly training the next big AI model?
Interestingly, no. The sources indicate that, on platforms like CoreWeave anyway, the vast majority of the workload is now inference.
So using the models, not building them.
Exactly. Running the models to generate text, analyze images, do tasks. Training demand grew like crazy, sure, but inference demand was maybe a generation behind and is now hitting that same exponential curve. The sources even say inference demand is overwhelming the supply chain and what the cloud can actually deliver.
Okay, so you've got the models running.
Yeah.
The next step is making them easy to use, right, for actual work or just daily life. What about the software side, the interface?
This is where it gets really interesting. Moving beyond just raw power to how we interact with it. Agents are a big theme here. Google, for instance, has this thing called Project Mariner.
What is that?
It's described as a research prototype, exploring how we might interact with AI agents in the future, starting with web browsers.
So you could tell it to do something online for you.
Pretty much. Give it a goal,
Yeah.
or even a bunch of tasks up to 10, the sources mentioned, and the agent navigates the web to get them done.
Does it just run off on its own?
No, and that's critical. The sources emphasize user control. You can watch it work, step in, pause it. Early feedback apparently led to features like letting it run tasks in the background while you keep using the browser.
Sounds useful. Is it widely available?
It's aimed at enthusiasts right now, but the idea is these capabilities will likely make their way into Google's other products over time. Fits with what one source called the year of the agents.
And Google's looking beyond screens, too. The sources mentioned smart glasses again.
Yes, leveraging all these AI advancements like Gemini and also hardware progress to try new form factors. Gemini's going into phones, cars, TVs, watches.
Everywhere.
Right. But glasses are this kind of new frontier they've apparently never stopped working on. They're partnering with brands like Warby Parker, Gentle Monster.
Focusing on design.
Heavily. The sources stress the glasses have to look great because, well, you have to wear them on your face. It's not just about the tech.
Any cool examples of what they might do?
There was one neat anecdote mentioned from a tester. Put on the glasses, looked at a book, flipped through a chapter fast, and asked, "What did I just read?" And Gemini supposedly summarized it instantly. They're framing these as potential superpowers, hands-free access to info. Imagine asking, which field is my kid's soccer game on? And it just tells you.
Christ.
Still under wraps, according to the sources.
Okay, let's shift gears for a moment. Another big company that came up frequently in the sources, Tesla. Elon Musk recently made some comments about his commitment.
He did. Explicitly said he's committed to Tesla for the next 5 years. The sources noted this gave the stock a bit of a bump because there have been those investor concerns about him being maybe distracted.
Right.
But the sources also highlight his focus isn't just about showing up. It's about control, especially as Tesla moves into things like robotics, which he sees as crucial. He wants control.
So the commitment statement helped, but there's still underlying anxiety.
It seems that way. His engagement is key for investors wanting clarity, but him talking about, lots of other things can still make them nervous.
Yeah.
It boils down to him wanting control and investors wanting certainty about his focus on Tesla.
The sources also touched on his politics and whether that's impacting Tesla's sales.
Yeah, this raises that tricky question about leadership, personal views, and market reality. Musk apparently claims any weakness is mostly Europe and hitting everyone.
But the sources suggest otherwise.
They indicate sales softening in the U.S. and China, too. Partly more competition, absolutely. But they also cite his political stance as a factor. There's research mentioned suggesting EV buyers tend to lean more left of center.
And some are going elsewhere.
Apparently, yes, due to his political associations. There's even specific evidence cited, like GM's Cadillac getting trade-ins from former Tesla owners. Now, Musk has suggested maybe some conservative buyers are coming over now, but the sources are pretty clear. His politics have had an effect on sales. It's another challenge for him. Alongside meeting fresher products, maybe talking less politics might be part of the strategy going forward.
So quite a journey through the sources today. We've looked at the core chips, the huge infrastructure build by companies like Dell and CoreWeave, how AI players like Cohere are focusing on secure enterprise use.
Right. And then these new interaction models, agents like Google's Mariner, the potential of smart glasses, and even the specific company dynamics at Tesla with Musk's role in politics.
It really paints a picture of just massive investment, rapid technological change, all centered around the potential, the promise of AI.
And what stands out is how interconnected it all is. You need the NVIDIA chips for the Dell servers inside the CoreWeave data centers to run the Cohere model securely, or to power the OpenAI services driving things like Stargate.
A complex ecosystem, definitely.
And thinking about that scale, that Stargate comparison,
Yeah.
it leaves a really big question for you, the listener, to mull over. If this AI infrastructure build truly is comparable to something as foundational as the interstate highway system,
How much will it really change things?
exactly how fundamentally will this new superhighway system for intelligence reshape our economy, our jobs, our daily lives in the next 5–10 years? Will it unlock things we can barely imagine now, or will we hit unexpected roadblocks?